The Defender was the ultimate Land Rover, but it is no more. I have been wondering if the Ineos Grenadier is more of a Land Rover than the new Land Rover Defender is. And if it is, then I have a very big dilemma on my hands. Hello and welcome to the Overland Legend. I'm Alan. Well, today I've got a really interesting video. It's a dilemma that I've got that I never ever thought I'd have to deal with, and I never thought I'd have to face. But the more information I find out and the more I experience, I realize that I have to deal with this dilemma that I've got. So today I'm going to share with you a dilemma that I've had and some realizations that I've come to. And of course, I'm also going to tell you my 5 reasons why I think the Grenadier is more of a Land Rover than any Land Rover that Land Rover is currently making. But let me tell you how I got to that conclusion. Yeah, it's no secret that I'm a Land Rover fanatic, and that's what my whole channel is really about overlanding and about Land Rovers and about the lifestyle that they give you. And I mean, I've got a garage with 2 Land Rovers in here, and I have another garage, or my brother's garage, where I have another 2.5 Land Rovers in there. So there's no shortage of them, and it's clear that I absolutely love them, and that's not going to change. But the dilemma that I've got is, what do I replace this Discovery with? And I've driven for most of my life Defenders, and I drove a 90s for a couple of years. I had 2 different 90s, and then I got a 110, and I drove that for a long time. And then I really had to replace the 110 because I was just commuting too much, and it just wasn't practical anymore. And so I looked around, and I was actually thinking, I was waiting for that new Defender, but that was 12, 13 years ago, and that was still quite a few years out. So at the time, I looked at the Discovery, and they were good value at the time, and I got a Discovery 3, and I was over the moon. And it's been an absolute great vehicle, and it was the right decision at the time, and I've been so happy with it. But it's getting on now. It's almost 20 years old. I've had it for almost 13 years now. It's got over 330,000 kilometers on. It's still going fine. I still look after it. But there are things that concern me, and at some point I'm going to need to replace it. And I started that thinking process a while ago about what should I replace it with, and I'd waited for the Defender, and the Defender came, and I loved it, and I do love it, and I think it's a great vehicle. But then I started to think about things a little bit differently, and I thought to myself, you know what, it's not exactly what I wanted, and it's not exactly what I want. So, I need to look a little bit broader than that. And so I said to myself, what would the options be? And the options really are that new Defender, and then there's the Grenadier, of course, and the Land Cruisers. Those are, for me, in terms of overland vehicles, really what would work for me. Yesterday, I was on a test drive of with the Grenadier. It was I think it was the international test day, and it so happened that the testing drive place is really close to where I live, and so I thought, you know what, I'm just going to go, and going there and experiencing that vehicle off road. It really it's just changed the way I've thought about something. And I've investigated and looked at all these vehicles. I've watched so many YouTube videos about all these things, but you never really understand it and see it until you experience it. So you can only see so much, and honestly speaking, a lot of the stuff that you see online, it's really just one person's view based on what they experience, and you really don't get the full picture about it. What I've also noticed recently is looking at a lot of people who own these vehicles and drive them, real owners versus influencers or content creators that that get these vehicles and keep them for a couple of months or a year just to make content. What you get out of that is really what you can just read in in a car review. But the real stuff comes from the owners who use them and live with them. So, I've just realized that it's quite different to what I thought it was. And that got me thinking about, Land Rover specifically and the Defender. And I mean, I'm a great supporter of that vehicle. I think it's brilliant. I've driven it also, and I've loved it. And it's incredibly capable. It's incredibly good, well designed. It looks good, and there's no doubt that it's the best you can get, basically. But it depends what you want it for and what you want out of it. And the reality is that, when I look at where I am and what I came from, from a Defender into the Discovery, which was like a super luxury car, but to go another level up from the Discovery is actually a step too far for me. I rather want to go one step back to the Defender. And I still have an older Defender, and I love driving it, but it's not something that I want to drive every day, and it's not practical in that sense. It's a novelty, and it's nice to drive, and it has its purpose, but to live with it on a daily basis, in my view, it's just past its time. I mean, it's approaching classic status. So enjoy them for what they are and how they were made, and keep them standard and enjoy it like that. And so, I mean, the realization that I came to, which is quite odd, because a lot of other people have come to that realization, and I never really got it, and I never really saw it, because I was, I like to give everyone a chance, and I was giving that, and I still give that new Defender a chance. I mean, who knows? Maybe that will be the one that I buy. But where my mindset is at the moment is I've just seen that. I understand exactly, why Land Rover's done what they've done, and they need to provide a product for a market that wants the product they're going to provide. And I mean, they've stated clearly that their strategy is luxury vehicles. They're targeting the luxury segment, and one of their metrics is selling price. They want to drive the selling price as high as possible, and that's why they have all of these, special editions. They have the Octas. They have all of these things, because these things allow them to get a higher price and make higher margins on effectively the same sort of vehicle. So and that's their strategy. It's well stated, and it's a good strategy, and financially looks like it's paying dividends. But for an owner like me, it's all very well, but I'm looking for something to serve my purpose, and it's just, it's that step too far. And so let me tell you about that Grenadier. Because yesterday I had a chance to go on that test drive day and drove it off-road for almost 2 hours, and it was quite an experience.
From the start I was intrigued by the Grenadier and followed its development, but I started to lose interest as it seemed like it was going to be too modern. I didn't really like the look, and then once it was launched, the pricing was way higher than I expected, and I just lost interest. Then a while ago I came across more and more owners' videos talking about how they were using them and modifying them. The most impressive being the GP Factor Grenadier with the Salinas Alucab roof conversion, and I was once again intrigued. I drove the 3-litre diesel Trailmaster version, and we were at Hobby Park on the West Rand, where we followed the yellow route.
There you can do a couple of options. The steering wheel is mechanical, up, down, in and out if you want to.
No, I think
you're fine with that. The back rest is fine.
It was a pretty miserable day, with cold and rain the whole day, but this didn't faze the Grenadier. It was by no means a rough off-road route, but it had some tricky climbs, some descents and a few axle twisters. It was more than enough to get a feel for the vehicle. The most impressive part for me was the comfort. It was a lot more comfortable than I had expected. I was expecting more Defender, but it felt more Discovery. It had the driving position and feeling and connectedness of a Defender, but the suspension feel and softness of a Discovery.
This is cool training.
The vehicle felt incredibly solid and planted, without feeling heavy and cumbersome. I was also impressed by the engine power and control. It sounded brilliant, like a quiet, powerful truck. All of this gave you a feeling of confidence and ability to go anywhere.
Put the car in the thing as well.
I know you are watching this video, but there is nothing like seeing and experiencing these vehicles in person. You can watch hours and hours of video, but there's only so much information you can get from a video. In just an hour with this vehicle, you can answer hundreds of questions and really understand exactly what it's all about. On the way back, I got into a bit of a cross-axle situation, but managed to get out easily without even using the diff locks. I was impressed by the traction and the ability of this vehicle as is, without using diff locks. Just a quirky little note, I also really like the windscreen wipers because they just remind me of the good old Defender windscreen wiper, which is not the greatest, so I hope these ones work a lot better than those old Defender ones do. It's quite clear that Ineos have used as little electronics as possible, and I appreciate that. For some it may seem that you are paying a big price tag without all the safety and convenience aids that all the other vehicles have. But for people like me, I don't see the benefit of those, especially when they come at the cost of reliability and longevity. I got the feeling that this was a vehicle that I could trust and keep and maintain for a long time. I like the balance of tech and simplicity.
You know, the funny realization that I had was that here's a vehicle that's not a Land Rover, but when you experience it and drive it and look at it and feel it and see it and understand it, it's more of a Land Rover than what any Land Rover is that's made today. And let me tell you those 5 reasons why I say that. So the first one is, when you think about why that Grenadier was designed and how it was designed, and you draw the comparison to Land Rover. So Land Rover was initially conceptualized based off a Jeep and started with a Jeep and then evolved from that into the Series 1. And obviously the Grenadier started from the Land Rover, from the Defender. The fact that the Defender was stopped, they then just built a vehicle themselves. So starting off with really that thought process and that as a not as a blueprint but as an idea, and then took everything else that was better and built something that gives that vehicle that you've got today. And when you think about the spirit of that and the spirit of Land Rover, how Land Rover started and what it meant and what it was for and the purpose built sort of concept of it, then it's the same thing. So that parallel is there. This thing was designed with a purpose to improve it, to continue something, and clearly for users and for owners who were wanting something like that. So, and right now, Land Rover is designing something and selling vehicles that are appealing to a new market, that want something that's arguably more similar to other things they can already get in the market. It's not something that's unique. That vehicle, those vehicles, it's not, the technology might be unique and groundbreaking and everything, but the engineering and the thought process behind it is just to get more of the same. So in that part, I think Grenadier wins hands down. And then the second part, which leads on from that, is it was designed for purpose. It was designed for farmers. It was designed for people to use as a utilitarian vehicle, to do the similar type of job that a Jeep did for the army. They wanted that vehicle, the Land Rover, to do that for the civilian. And that's why it was designed with purpose, with a specific purpose in mind, function over design or aesthetic. And that's exactly what the Grenadier is. It's designed functional. That's what everything is about. It's functional. It looks good and it works well. And some of the things are a bit quirky, yes, because it's function. And that's the thing that they wanted to design first. Then the third thing that I think makes it more of a Land Rover than any Land Rover that's being made is Land Rover. One of the reasons I've always loved Land Rovers, and to this, well, not to this day, but until, you know, the day that the last Defender left the floor, and to an extent the vehicles today, but less so, when they drive off that floor, you can drive them straight off and you can use them straight away. A lot of other vehicles in the markets, other brands, you have to do a whole lot of modifications to get that vehicle up to some sort of a capability for either off-road or overland. And Land Rover's always been straight out of the box. I mean, the very first Land Rovers, they were built exactly like that. They would drive straight out of the showroom floor onto the fields or into the mud, and you didn't need to do anything. You didn't need to upgrade anything. You could just use it as it was. And that's exactly what the Grenadier is right now. You can drive that thing right out into the trails, and that's that. You can take it and go straight away. You don't have to do anything extra. And in fact, they designed it so that if you do want to do things extra, they've helped you, and it's easier to do those things. So there again, it's a straight out of the box option, and it's designed specifically with that purpose and that ability. And then the fourth reason is that vehicle is built with nuts and bolts. It's built with stuff that you can take apart. You can take things out. You can take the fender corner off. You can take things and fix things and change things. It's not made with plastic clips, with retaining clips. You know, all of these things that you find on these new vehicles, which are, you know, as someone who wants to look after it and keep it and manage it, it's impossible. It's not impossible, but it's just not nice to have to, you know, pull things off with these plastic clips and everything all the time. You rather just want to use a bolt and nut and do that. And I understand the economies of production and the safety and all of that, but that's not what I want. And that's not what I think those types of owners want. So again, that Grenadier is designed and made that you can take it apart and if you want to, and adjust things and change things. And also the construction of it, I mean, is when you drive it and you're experiencing, you can just feel it. I mean, the solidity of that thing is incredible, and there's lots of videos you can watch about the underside and, you know, the thickness of all the metal and everything. It's really just made super strong and bolted together, you know, the way that arguably an older Land Rover would have been. And it's not a Land Rover, but I mean, that parallel and that concept is there, and that sort of ethos, the ability to take them apart and fix them and put them together again and rebuild them, is what gives them the longevity. And that Grenadier has a large element of that. I mean, yes, there is a lot of plastic in that, but the core of it is still nuts and bolts, and you can take it apart, fix it, redo it, and put it together again, and you keep going. And the fifth reason is the strangest reason that I've come across, and it's really interesting for me, having understood this and experienced it a bit more. As I've been researching all these vehicles and following people and seeing who they are and what they're doing, I came to the realization that I identify more with current owners of Grenadier than I do with current owners of, for example, a new Defender. And that's simply because that vehicle is designed, each of those vehicles are attracting certain types of users. And that's by design and by purpose. And so what that tells me is that exactly what Grenadier said they would do is they would make a vehicle to replace the Defender, and clearly they seem to be doing that, because
a lot of those owners, and yes, they're not Land Rover, all Land Rover people, and I mean, whether you drive an old Toyota Land Cruiser or not, or a Jeep, there's a certain amount of commonality in your thinking and in your outlook and in your lifestyle preferences and how you like to enjoy life and enjoy those vehicles, and that they've clearly captured in that vehicle, and that's what those owners are experiencing. And you don't experience that with that new Defender. I mean, a lot of people call it a mall crawler, and yes, it can do that very well. And the reality is that the majority of those vehicles are doing the mall crawling. And there's a lot of examples of people that have kitted them out and that are using them quite successfully. And I'm sure you can, the same way as I've used my Disco quite successfully. But is it purpose built for that? No, it's purpose built for luxury, and it can do the other things, whereas something like the Grenadier is purpose built for that function, and it can do some luxury. So it's just where the emphasis is and where it is, and I mean, for each person it's your own preference as to whether which is more important for you. But that thing about the owners is just really interesting, and the fact that when I've looked at and been reading about a lot of owners that have been driving them and using them, and how they go about and experience them and fix them and deal with them is very different to to owners of, for example, new Defenders. Yeah, so those are my 5 reasons why I think the Grenadier is more of a Land Rover than anything that Land Rover is making today. And when you take all of those things, and it's not it's not about the diff locks, and it's not about the for me, about the suspension and it has axles and that sort of thing, and it has normal transfer box, and you've got a lever to pull it and all of those things. I mean, yes, they are important, they make a difference, but it's about everything that you put together and everything that you experience with that vehicle. And driving it, and when I drove it, I felt that I felt that connectedness to the vehicle and to the terrain that you drove over. And and one of the things that I've always experienced with my Discovery is I did feel there's definitely an element of disconnection from the terrain, and the more luxurious and the more able or more self sort of driving your vehicle is, the less connected you feel to the terrain and to the vehicle itself. And that's always been a little bit odd, and I like that with the Grenadier. I felt more like I was in a Defender that was just a bit more comfortable, but I still felt that confidence and that ability that you can do anything. But I felt it even more so because the vehicle was seemingly more capable. It had more power, it had more control. It seemed to do everything a lot better. So it was like an improvement on this vehicle. And I mean, those trails we did yesterday were not difficult, and I mean, this vehicle would do it just literally idling with a little bit of accelerator, but it just wouldn't be the same experience. And when you got onto the open road, it would be quite different again. So yeah, so that was just my experience driving that vehicle, and coming to a realization that maybe I'm not going to buy a Land Rover, but you never know. Maybe I do. Maybe after I've driven, I need to go and drive some of those other vehicles. Maybe it is a Toyota. Who knows? But certainly, I was impressed with the Grenadier. I really was. I could feel the Land Rover in it. I could feel the purpose-builtness of it. I could feel the strength of it, the confidence of it. It was a really, really impressive vehicle, and I didn't think that you could make a Defender more comfortable, and more capable, and and still have a luxurious feel, and I definitely got that from that Grenadier. So it was an eye opener, to be honest. Thinking about this concept of, okay, I might buy a vehicle that's not a Land Rover, but that's why I thought about the top 5 things of why I think it's more of a Land Rover than a Land Rover is, because it's not a Land Rover, but yet it feels more like a Land Rover, and a new Defender to me doesn't feel like a Land Rover. So it's really quite strange. I mean, just because it doesn't have a name badge, and that's the thing with these vehicles is they all have name badges, but
you know, we get to know them and experience them in such a way that they become very personal, and you live with them and you use them and you trust them, and you need something that can do that for you. And I just found that I just think that Grenadier can do that for you. It's got that, you know, that thing that a Land Rover has, and maybe, you know, I guess if you're a Toyota guy with a Land Cruiser for decades, it's got that as well. And I mean, you know, at the test drive, there was a guy there with an old, you know, 79 series, and he was looking at that Grenadier. So you know, it was just really interesting to experience that, to see that they are doing what they said they would do, and people are reacting to that. And I think when I look at that vehicle and I understand it more, I think that thing's going to be around for a long time, and it's going to leave a mark. And yeah, and I think if you own one of those, I think you'll have it a long time, and you'll be hard pressed to find something better to replace it, which is, you know, which is what I experienced with Land Rover, to be honest. I never felt the need to buy anything else, and I was always happy to drive one of them. But of late, that wasn't the case, and I had doubts. And yeah, it's just nice that there are other options. So thank you so much for watching. Been a different video, but thank you. And if you haven't subscribed to my channel, please do. I've got tons of Land Rover info and content, all my stories, and you know, all my experience with Landies is all in there. So please watch that, and thank you so much, and I'll see you next time. Bye.